I'll call the Hastings City Council to order. Let the roll reflect that all council members are present and a quorum has been established. Tonight, we have before us a swearing-in ceremony for Police Commander Brian Showalter and Police Sergeants Kyle Linscheid and Chris Nelson. And I will turn it over to Chief Schaefer. Chief, welcome to the meeting this evening.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, and city staff. Tonight, I have the honor of introducing to you Hastings' new police commander and police sergeants, as the mayor pointed out. These promotions round out the last of the organizational and leadership changes in the Hastings Police Department. I'm extremely proud of our department and the men and women who serve. The great strides we've made in the last almost 4 years has been nothing short of outstanding. Culture and organizational change is no easy feat and would not have been possible without the support of city staff and the city council. This is a testament to your commitment to the police department and the community, and I thank you very much for that. The following appointments give me a sense of great pride and excitement for what is yet to come as these officers step forward and accept leadership roles. Douglas MacArthur once said, "A true leader has the confidence to stand alone, the courage to make tough decisions, and the compassion to listen to the needs of others. He does not set out to be a leader, but becomes one by the quality of his actions and the integrity of his intent." This holds true for each of the officers being recognized tonight. First, I'd like Commander Showalter to step forward. Brian Showalter is an 11-year veteran with the Hastings Police Department. He graduated from Concordia University with a master's degree in 2015. He completed the Minnesota BCA Supervision and Management graduate program in 2015. Graduated from Metropolitan State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in 2013, his associate degree in law enforcement in 2004, and he will be attending the Northwestern Staff and Command School in 2 weeks from now. He'll be gone for about 10 weeks to, again, increase his management and leadership skills. He started as a patrol officer in 2006 through 2009. He became a drug task force investigator in 2009 through 2014. He became a sergeant team leader on the drug task force through 2014. He returned back to patrol here in 2014 until May of 14, and then became a patrol sergeant up until July when he was appointed as police commander. At this point in time, I would welcome Julie Flatten up front to administer the oath to Commander Showalter.
I, Brian Showalter, do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and the ordinances of the City of Hastings, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of Police Commander for the City of Hastings, the counties of Dakota and Washington, the state of Minnesota. I will always hold myself and others accountable for our actions, never betraying my badge, my integrity, or the public I serve. So help me God. Thank you. It's much longer than I remembered.
You shortened it up. Yeah. You want to step right there? Go ahead. As is tradition with the swearing in, we'll now have the badge pinning. One of the most well-known symbols of policing is the badge. This badge is a symbol of trust. The authority it conveys comes from and belongs to the people of Hastings. Tonight, the badge will be pinned on Brian Showalter by his father, Daryl. I'd welcome Daryl forward to do so. Mayor, would you like to get a picture?
Yeah, why don't we get a picture, Council, if you come in front of the dais, and then we'll do
We'll do the pair together with the next group, so.
Sounds good.
Next, we'd like to recognize Sergeant Kyle Linscheid and Chris Nelson. If you two would step forward, please. Sergeant Kyle Linscheid is a 9-year veteran of the Hastings Police Department. Graduated from St. Agnes High School in 2003. Graduated from Winona State University with a bachelor's in criminal justice and law enforcement in 2007. He also has completed the Minnesota BCA Supervision and Management Series in 2016. He started with the police department in 2008 as a patrol officer through 2011. Many of you probably recognize Kyle. He was our school resource officer from 2011 to about 2014. He went to the Drug Task Force as an investigator and also finished as a sergeant team leader with the Drug Task Force between 2015 and 2017. Sergeant Christopher Nelson, 4 years with the Hastings Police Department. He's got a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science from Iowa State University. He completed his law enforcement certificate at Metro State in 2012. He became a police officer with the City of Hastings, second career, I might add. In 2013 through 2015, he was a patrol officer, became one of our investigators, fabulous investigator, in fact, from 2015 to 2017. So at this point, I would like to welcome the two of you over here to be sworn in by Julie.
I, Christopher Nelson. I, Kyle Linscheid. Do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America, the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and the ordinances of the City of Hastings, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of a police sergeant for the City of Hastings, counties of Dakota and Washington, and the state of Minnesota. I will always hold myself and others accountable for our actions,
Never betraying my badge.
never betraying my badge, my integrity, or the public I serve. So help me God. Thank you.
This will be an easy one. Their badges will be pinned on by wives Katie and wife Katie.
Okay, Council?
Yes. Oh, very good. So with that, I would like Pastor Brzezowski to say a few short words.
As always, we want to always remember all of our law enforcement officers in prayer. I'm so proud of each and every one tonight. What a great honor. And I'd like to pray for you three, if you'd stand. There you go. And Father, we thank you, Lord, for these wonderful men who've taken this call to protect our city, our state, and our country. We thank you for their wives and their families that support them, as well as the community. We ask that you keep their families safe and keep them safe and give them the wisdom and guidance that they need every day to do their jobs. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please give them one more round of applause. Now we have a few citizens to recognize. I'm going to turn that part over to Deputy Chief Wilski.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor Hicks, City Council, members of the community, and all of you, thank you for coming today. This is actually a very exciting day for the Hastings Police Department, Hastings Fire Department. It's an opportunity for us to recognize some outstanding work by citizens in our community. And a quality police department really relies on quality citizens and those that step up when they need to. So, did you take my paper? Oh, here it is. I wouldn't put it past. No, I'm just kidding. So for our first award, I would ask that Jerry Lee Harrington and Melanie Ann Olson please come up to the podium. And actually, this will be my first time meeting them as well. I won't embarrass you. If I do, you can kick me in the shins. What's that? In the early evening hours of June 30th, 2017, Mr. Harrington and Miss Olson were traveling on Vermilion Street when they observed a female in a parking lot of Ardent Mills that appeared to be in distress. Mr. Harrington and Miss Olson immediately turned around and entered the lot to assist the female. Mrs. Angela Tukuafu? Excellent. Mrs. Olson immediately recognized the urgency of the situation with her background in medicine and began providing life support measures with the assistance of Mr. Harrington. The life support measures included CPR and notifying first responders of the situation and their location. Additional citizens stopped, including Mrs. Tammy Piney, to assist with the efforts. Hastings Police and Hastings Fire arrived, and Mrs. Tukuafu was transported by ambulance to United Hospital. If it were not for the quick thinking and actions by Mr. Harrington and Miss Olson, it is very possible that Ms. Tukuafu may not be with us today to celebrate. The Hastings Police Department and Hastings Fire Department would like to honor Mr. Harrington and Mrs. Olson with the Citizens Life-Saving Award. And I'd also like to say that Mrs. Tukuafu, if you'd like to come up, that would be great, Angela. It's my understanding that all of you have become closer friends through Facebook and communications like that, and it is just great to hear. So I'm going to allow the chief to present these awards. Why don't you come over here for the awards by the chief?
Right here's our reward. That's our reward.
If you guys want to say anything, you're more than welcome to.
All I can say is that if you see somebody, stop. Even if all you do is pound on their chest, you're doing something. Because I have 3 little kids back there that wouldn't have their mom if they hadn't stopped. Because I didn't know enough that I was needing help.
So,
If you
Thank
think
you.
it's funny looking, he saw it and said, should we stop? Should we go back? And I said, yeah, go back. And this is the result, the mom that has 3 kids that have their mom. So stop if you think something looks funny.
Oh, and probably a husband that
And a husband too.
doesn't,
Sorry.
doesn't know how to parent their own too.
I'd like to give a shout out to the paramedics too and the first responders who were they were there really, really fast and really did a great job, so. Like I said, this is our reward right here. I told her that day if she comes through this, it's a miracle, so. It's a miracle.
Well, thank you for being the ones that stop. We appreciate it. We really do. All right. Get a picture of all of them. And we do have one more award. Mr. Ronald Davis. I haven't met Ronald either, so it's an honor. You come right over here or in front, wherever you'd like. On July 15, 2017, Officer Wood located a suspect wanted for violating a restraining order. When Officer Wood confronted the suspect and attempted to arrest him, a struggle ensued. The suspect physically resisted Officer Wood's attempts to handcuff him. Officer Wood ended up on the ground, and the suspect continued to fight against Officer Wood. While struggling with the suspect, a neighbor realized Officer Wood needed help and stepped in to assist. Mr. Davis helped Officer Wood by helping restrain the suspect until he could be handcuffed. Knowing the suspect, Mr. Davis attempted to defuse the situation by telling the suspect to follow the orders and relax. He also helped by physically holding the suspect down. Mr. Davis made the decision to help with little regard for his own safety. He accepted the responsibility to help another person when the opportunity presented itself. He should be commended for his bravery and the actions he took in a situation where not many people would have acted. The Hastings Police Department is grateful to Mr. Davis for his assistance in this matter. And Officer Wood, I'd like you to come up too and be in this picture. So thank you on behalf of Hastings Police Department. I appreciate it. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. What's that? Ron, do you want to say any words?
All of a sudden, the council meeting broke out.
Thank you, Mayor. We're through those that are participating in the event. We're going to have cake and coffee over at the police department if you want to follow us out, and we'll let you continue with the rest of your program. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll just wait 1 second. Hi, Reverend. Yeah, I'm going to recognize you in just a minute. Just want to give folks a chance to get out. Okay. Okay, council, I'll call us back to order. We also have a presentation tonight, this weekend, at the Leduc Mansion. Happens every year, is the Civil War weekend, one of my favorite times of the year in Hastings. It's always a great event, and we have a presentation tonight to talk about the Civil War weekend that's coming up, and I'll turn it over to Amy Deaver. Amy, welcome to the council meeting. We're very glad to have you here.
Thank you, Mary Hicks. I'm always happy to come here every now and again. I found this old dress in the attic, decided to throw it on for you, you know. I literally did find it in the attic today. I just want you to be, completely honest about that. I don't know whose it is, but it fits, so I wore it. Yeah. We're getting ready for another Civil War weekend, and I have to admit, following up on everything else on the agenda, I'm feeling kind of like, wow, I'm a little bit not so important. But I do want to say, I didn't get to thank them as they were going out the door, but thank goodness to our police staff. I get called at 2 o'clock in the morning when the bats go flying around the house at the Leduc. I have a 100-year-old house, so sometimes they fly around there too, but not as often. And so thank you to the police force of Hastings for going there for me. I get the call, and unless they call me back, they usually find out that it's a bat, and so I go back to sleep at that point. So yes, I'm very, very, very appreciative of them, and I very rarely get to see them and say thank you, so they're very important to me. Civil War weekend this year, we've often celebrated years of the Civil War, but we ran out of wars, we ran out of years, and so now we're going with themes. And if any of you know about General Leduc, he was a quartermaster in the Civil War, and he wrote a book called This Business of War. And he really felt that quartermastering, which is basically food, shelter, and clothing for the men, was a business. And his memoirs are really quite well written. He was a fairly intelligent writer. And so this year, that's what we're celebrating. And so yes, William Leduc will be showing up on site, not as a ghost, although from what I hear, he does show up on site as a ghost. He doesn't ever talk to me, but yeah, we do have paranormals at the house, and yes, William and Alice Leduc apparently have ongoing conversations with people at the house. Not me, but yes, we have a reenactor that will be there for William Leduc, and also Spencer Johnson. For those of you who had Spencer Johnson as a teacher or who know Spencer Johnson, you know that Spencer Johnson is critical to our Civil War weekend, and so he will be dressing up as a quartermaster also, and they will be basically inspecting the ground. So this is something that we've never done for Civil War weekend. We're going to basically say, yes, let's reenact William Leduc. A lot of times we talk about battles. Understandably, it is a Civil War weekend, but we're going to have a slightly different focus this weekend, which we are really excited about. We are also, for those parents that are thinking about coming, we have something very distracting for the children. We're creating a general store this year. So yes, there will be caramels and gingerbread and shortbread and candy, and yes. Candy was kind of a new thing during the Civil War. I didn't know this. There's actually a poem that we will be featuring, yes, about the evils of candy. And so yes, we've all always known that candy was evil, and they knew it even when they first came up with the idea. Yeah. Other than that, we have a lot of speakers, and of course, Mayor Hicks will come on his annual visit to read the Gettysburg Address. Those of you who are thinking about coming on Saturday at 1 o'clock, we will have the mayor reading the Gettysburg Address.
2 minutes long, so we're okay.
Yeah, exactly, yes. On Sunday, we're going to have a new reader of the Gettysburg Address. Tony Jurgens is going to be coming to read the Gettysburg Address. We'll be having a couple speakers, again, all talking about what it's really like to be a soldier. I really wish I knew this quote because I mention it all the time, but those of you who know about soldiering, there's an old quote that says, 99% of a soldier's life is boredom, interspersed by moments of sheer terror. And that's one of the things that sometimes when you celebrate wars, you don't tend to feature. And so this is the year where we're going to really be talking about the fact that, yeah, soldiers sat around a lot of time and were bored, And we won't be boring. I promise we won't be boring. But yes, we are going to be doing that. Other than that, we do have, I know you mentioned Civil War Weekend, which we're very excited about. But we do in October, I shouldn't even promote this anymore because I know it's going to be a complete sellout, but we're doing a Tennessee whiskey tasting. And I road trip down to Tennessee, that's right. I brought back some Tennessee whiskey that is, you can't buy it in Minnesota. And there's just wonderful stories and great history that I get to teach in conjunction with whiskey. How can you go wrong with that? We can only fit 34 people into the parlor. So if you're interested, call now, because it's already about half full. Other than that, we continue on with our high teas and other wonderful events at the site. And we have a rooster. And I apologize. I'm just going to be quite blunt and tell you that it happened. I know this is against city code. I didn't order the rooster. So just of you who don't know about chickens, how chickens work is you can order straight-run chickens. That means you don't know if they're going to be a male or female. I said, we're not going to do this anymore. This is too risky. We have to butcher all of our roosters, which is sad. We shouldn't be butchering the men. And so now we just order females. But if you order 15 females, you get a freebie, a free exotic chicken. And you don't know what kind of chicken it is. And it's lovely. It's gray. It's a lavender Orpington. And it has come into its full testosterone and is now wandering around the coop, crowing at full throat. So I just want you to know it's only with us for a short while longer because he adds so much flavor to our Civil War weekend. But on Monday, the day after Civil War, he will be going on sabbatical somewhere. I'm not sure where, but he's been a lot of fun to watch. I just have to say that. Do you have any questions for the Leduc Historic Estate? I might be able to answer them.
Council, is there any questions or comments? Okay.
By
Thank you,
all
Amy,
means,
for being here.
comment.
Appreciate it.
Yes, and the program is, I'm already done with it, and it's on our Facebook page. So if you want to take a look at it, we'd love to have you.
It's always a
gonna be
great weekend. I
event.
look forward to seeing you on
Yeah,
Saturday.
you definitely.
All
Take
right,
care.
Thank you. Thank you. The council, you have the minutes of the regular city council meeting of August 21st, 2017. Any additions or corrections to the minutes of that meeting? Seeing none, they stand approved. Council items to be considered. Council, any items to be considered? Councilmember Fulch, did you have a? I don't think it was on the printed one. We have the added on the item, the Main Street weed controls, number 4 under administration. I just want to make that clear. Okay. All right. And then we have consent agenda. Council, what's your wish? Councilmember Brox makes a motion to approve, second by Councilmember Fulch. That motion is now before the body. Is there any further discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Next, we'll go to awarding of contracts and public hearing. Tonight, we have a public hearing in relation to City Code, amending rezone C2 to C4, the Kateria Smith Funeral Home, 3075 Main Street. John, welcome to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. I'm going to pull up a presentation here, if you bear with me for a moment. The item we have before us tonight is a rezoning request and public hearing pertaining to what most people know as the Knights of Columbus site at 3075 Vermilion Street. I'll put a map up of the property here in a moment, and hopefully we'll have some projector coming up here momentarily as well. The action is a public hearing to consider the rezoning request. The property in question right now is located at 3075 Vermilion Street, Zone C2, which is an auto-oriented zoning district. What is being proposed is a rezoning of this property to C4, which would be consistent with the use that is being proposed, which is a funeral home and crematorium. Kateria Smith, who has operated a funeral home in Hastings for many years, is planning to purchase the site, demolish the existing building, and build a new facility at the site. Now, before us tonight is just the rezoning aspect of it. There will be a separate action related to the site plan, that is the building, the parking, the layout of the site. That'll go through Planning Commission and City Council at a later date. So tonight, what we're looking at in particular is the rezoning, the change in the zoning from C2 to C4 on the site itself. We did have the Planning Commission look at this. They reviewed this at their August 14th meeting. They did recommend approval on a 4-0 vote with limited discussion. There was a public hearing as part of the Planning Commission review, but there was no public comment given at that night. The Planning Commission recommendation went forward to the City Council on August 21st. We did have a first reading at night, and we also had some brief discussion of the project at that time. We did have a representative from Me and Julio Restaurant who voiced some concern about environmental effects of the operation. Beyond that individual, we have heard no other public comment related to the rezoning request at hand. We did notify on 2 different occasions, one for the Planning Commission meeting and then one for the City Council meeting tonight as well. So within your packet, I've presented some of the information from Planning Commission and also some information about the funeral home and in more particular the cremation process itself. One of the things that we were asked to consider early on was whether what the zone and how the use would be considered under our city code. And after doing some research into the funeral home and cremation process with the help of Mr. Starkson, I was able to view a facility and in another town in which a cremation was going on to be able to sense what the activities were, what the effects were at the property line. At that time, I realized that the effects would be minimal on that one. We could support this as a permitted use within the zoning district itself. I also took a look at other zoning districts as well, or other city zoning codes as well, to see how they treated similar types of uses. There wasn't much differentiation between funeral homes and crematoria within other zoning codes. Some zoning codes did have funeral homes, crematoria, special uses. Others had them as permitted uses outright. Our code right now doesn't call it in particular funeral homes or crematoria, but it does have a general classification of retail and service uses, which this would fall under here. So we are looking to rezone the property tonight. This would fall under the retail and service provisions of the zoning code, which would be a permitted use. So I've put some information in the packet on the cremation process, some of the regulations of crematoria as well. They're licensed through the Minnesota Department of Health to ensure safe operations. There's also been several studies that have taken place that PCA at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has other studies that have went on to determine any effects from emissions from a crematoria to see if there would be any further regulations necessary. They have opted not to further regulate. So they are bound by regular PCA requirements. However, there's nothing special for crematoria, and they are licensed in the operation through the Minnesota Department of Health. So tonight, we do have a public hearing to consider the change of zoning of the site here from C2 to C4. We do have representatives from Couturier Smith present here tonight if you have any questions for them, and I can stand for any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for that presentation. I'm going to open up the public hearing. The public hearing is open. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to the issue regarding the rezoning from C2 to C4 at 3075 Vermillion Street? Anyone here would like to speak to that particular issue? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Council, let's deal with this issue before us. Council, what's your wish? Councilmember Brox?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question. It was noted in the Planning Commission minutes that one of the commissioners was interested if there was an auto business that came to Hastings and needed space. Are there other spaces available that are zoned correctly that they could occupy? I'm in favor of this rezoning effort. I'll just say that. I don't have a problem with it, but I think that is a valid question as we're planning and looking to the future. Is there space there for an auto business, or are there any other spaces that would be available?
Sure, Council Member. Most of the C2 district in which auto sales are allowed are comprised of existing auto dealerships. We don't have a lot of vacant land that is zoned for that at present. It doesn't mean that land could be rezoned in the future for a C2 use. What we would typically do is look at something that would be adjacent to that district. So we have, in the upper portion here, you can see the Hastings Chrysler site, and in the bottom portion, the Hastings Ford site. So anything within this corridor here in the future, either adjacent to it to the north or south or within it, I think that we would look upon favorably as a rezoning of it. If it was a situation where it was a standalone site, that might be a little more difficult.
Okay. Council, the issues before us. Councilmember Folge.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't have a problem with this either. I just kind of have a procedural question for John, and it has to deal with uses being permitted or by special permit, because you had just mentioned that sometimes it's a special permit for a funeral home or in a crematorium, and that was also reflected in the write-up. And so I was wondering, what does that mean if it's a special permit? I mean, it clearly isn't now, but I'm just concerned that it isn't addressed in our zoning, and I'm not sure if it should be or not. And so I was just curious, what would that mean if it was by special permit?
Sure. Council member, within the zoning code itself, uses are described as either permitted uses, which means they're outright permitted with no further review by city council, or they're designated as special uses, which require a special use permit review by the planning commission, ultimately approval by the council. So different cities classify things differently. You may go to city A, things may be allowed outright. City B, they would be allowed by a special use permit. So we don't have the discretion to look at things individually to determine whether they should be a special use or not. But we do have the authority within our zoning code to designate certain uses as being either permitted outright or via special use permit.
Okay. And so do you feel that this is something that in the future should be addressed within our zoning code, or is this kind of a moot point? Because I guess I don't understand what it is that would have to have the special permit. Like, would it be hours of operation, or would it be some sort of, I'm not sure what kind of threshold they would have to meet to be able to get that permit. I just want to make sure that we're covering our bases here, that's all.
Sure. When we take a look at the uses that are allowed within a district itself, I mean, in general, when we're determining what uses would be permitted and what should be a special use permit, we would take a look at what sort of effects and whether those effects require public notification and/or other review or conditions set by the council on that. So we would have to kind of take a step back from an individual application and really take a look at the ordinance itself to see if we're covering things or not. In a situation like this, with other regulatory authorities having authority over the operation of funeral home or crematorium, I'm not terribly concerned on that aspect of how the funeral home operates itself, but others may feel differently.
Okay, thank you, John.
Councilmember Vaughn?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just make 2 quick points. I appreciate you doing the homework on the Department of Health. That was a concern of mine. I'm glad that we did our research and we got that taken care of, and hopefully it's passed on to the concerned neighbors of that. I appreciate the community's Coteria-Smith continuing to invest in Hastings. It's been a long family-owned businesses that's continued to do that, so I appreciate it. With that, I'm going to motion that we approve to rezone this from C2 to C4.
Councilmember Vaughn makes a motion to approve from the rezone C2 to C4. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilmember Lund. That motion is before the body. Okay, further discussion to the motion. Councilmember Liefeld.
John, this may be something that's coming up at a later date, but if we go from a C2, which seems like auto specialized commerce, limited use, not as much traffic, to a C4, which is retail and service, obviously more traffic, unfortunately. Do we have any anticipation of what type of an impact that will have on Highway 61, that minimal entrance going into the facility? Are we going to be looking at something there, or is that a down the road sort of a deal?
Sure, Council Member. With the site plan, we would generally take a look at site details for entrances and exits and so forth. And in general, with this being a commercial zone throughout here, and I don't anticipate that there would be an issue coming up along Highway 61 from a traffic volume standpoint. What we would take a look at would be the entrances onto to Highway 61, making sure that they're in a safe location.
Thanks, John.
Okay. The body has a motion before it. Is there further discussion to the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. All right, next is before us is a resolution considering reversal of decision by administrative official. John, I'll turn that over to you.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. This is a little bit of an unusual request tonight. The City Council will be serving as the Board of Adjustments and Appeal. The Board of Adjustments and Appeal has a provision within it in which a person who disagrees with the finding of an administrative official, in this case that would be me, can ask the Board of Adjustments and Appeal to reverse that decision. And so the request before you tonight is from Andy McCoy of 209 West 7th Street. Mr. McCoy has constructed this structure, as you can see on the screen here, which is what I determined to be a fence located above an existing hedgerow. This is Mr. McCoy's house here at 209 West 7th Street. This is taken from the neighboring property. So as you take a look at the structure, I believe it's about 7.5 feet in height from the floor. Underneath this portion here, there's no panels. It's just poles interspersed. So it's not completely, there's not a complete fence panel as you go below the hedge line itself. We were made aware of this, that this was being constructed, and we went out to investigate, made a determination that this was a fence. Being a fence and being in a historic district, a couple of things had to take place. Number one, they needed to have approval by the HPC, the Heritage Preservation Commission, prior to installation. 2, a fence permit would be necessary. And 3, there would be a fence height provision of 6 feet maximum on the site. This structure, as it sits right now, is above 6 feet. 6 feet would probably be about here generally. And so in order to build something of this size at this location, it would not be allowed by code if determined to be a fence. It would, if it was to continue, there would need to be a variance and a hardship presented in order for that to be constructed. So I had some conversations with Mr. McCoy, gave Mr. McCoy some options as to what he could do with this. He did bring this forward to HPC on the review aspect of it for architectural consistency with the historic district. They did review that at their meeting in August, or July or August on that one. Did table the final action of it, waiting for outcome of either the variance or determination that this would be a fence on the property itself. And so that is the question before you tonight. And within the packet, there's a lot of information and concerning Mr. McCoy and some disagreements he's had with neighbor who abuts the fence on the other side of it. I will remind the council that the question that we have specifically before us tonight is the question of whether this specifically should be determined to be a fence, and therefore affirm the decision of the administrative official that this is a fence. If it's determined to be a fence, it would be bound by the 6-foot height requirement. Mr. McCoy at that time would have the option of either removing the fence or applying for a variance for the fence itself in order for it to move forward. If the determination by City Council tonight is to determine to reverse the decision of staff, determine that this is not a fence, that would require a 6 of 7 vote, and we're asking specifically for specific findings of fact so that we can document that in a resolution. As stated within the report itself, we have prepared a couple of resolutions for consideration based upon the direction of council tonight. So with that, I can stand for any questions. Mr. McCoy here is here tonight as well if you have any questions for him. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, John. To Mr. McCoy and Ms. Dahl, you're here. We do have your letters. We have them before us. We have an opportunity to read them. I will ask if you wanted, I'll start with you, Mr. McCoy, since you're the appellant here. If you want to add to anything more that you want to add beyond your letter, you can come to the podium, but this would be the time. But we are well versed with the issue, and we do have your letter.
Yeah, I would just say that this is, the issue here is the neighbor keeps trimming the hedge, and this is my solution after 5 years of calling the police to get them to stop doing this. The hedge is on my property. It's been established that that is the case. I just want it left alone so that it can grow up. As you can see from the picture there, it grows a considerable amount each year, but then it ends up getting cut down by the neighbor. I'm just looking for it to be able to grow up the way it is. This is no different than when you have trouble with rabbits, they keep eating your hostas, you take and get some hardware cloth and put it over the hostas to keep the rabbits from eating the plants. That's basically what we're looking at. The panels are part of the hedge. They're there just to protect that upper part from being damaged anymore. And it's the panels are not a fence is standalone. It can do what it does without anything else there. If the hedge is gone, the panel doesn't have a purpose, and it would be gone also. So I don't see why this would be considered a fence. I have gotten no responses from the council as far as any questioning why they would see it as being a fence. So I can't answer any questions that I don't hear. So, I mean, like I say, I want the hedge left alone. That's the only reason those panels are there. Four out of the last 5 years, I've had to call the police to go talk to my neighbor to leave it alone. And that's all I'm trying to solve is the kick in the gut that I get every time I come home to find out that the hedge has been trimmed again after they have been instructed not to do it.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Ms. Dahl, you have the opportunity to speak as well, and we did receive a letter from staff on your behalf as well.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm not a rabbit, first of all. I'm an adult. I live in the house by myself, and at the HPC meeting, I was accused of being a nuisance to Mr. McCoy. And I've lived there for many decades, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. It's vibrant. We have people playing basketball in their backyards. We have grandparents babysitting their grandchildren. We have a block party that's hosted by Mr. McCoy. It's a neighborhood that's safe, and people are walking, and I'm being greeted, and I'm just quite confused why I'm being treated this way as a resident on that block. I have the purchase order for the hedge that I put in. I installed it before Mr. McCoy moved into the neighborhood. It was installed on June 6th of '03. And I installed Korean dwarf lilacs. And Mr. McCoy thinks that it should grow. Well, normally they don't grow more than 6 feet. The range is 4 to 6 feet, and right now, on my side, the height is 5.5. And the reason why it's maintained, which you're supposed to maintain it, is so that it blooms and that it stays healthy. So that's why I trim it. It's on my property. It's my hedge. I installed it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Magic elbow.
And I'm in control of the screen, too.
That's okay. Yep, you're in control of the screen.
Everything else.
Okay.
No big deal, I'll fix it.
So, and the paragraph that I wrote regarding the HPC, I think is a valid opinion that I have. And a number of you were on the commission when I was a commissioner for the HPC, and so I think you know the history.
Okay.
And Mr. Joe Balsonic is a neighbor of mine, and I don't think he sees me as a problem in the neighborhood. I hope not. And so, anyway, I hope I think that Mr. McCoy has every right to put up a fence. There are 6-foot fences around his property. I have no reservations about what kind of fence he would like to put up, as long as he follows the guidelines and the HPC guidelines and the city ordinances. I'm kind of nervous. I don't like to have to do this, but so I'm here.
All right. Well, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Appreciate it. Okay, council will bring discussion here to the Diaz and Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. John, I heard two different, very important points. One was that it's on her property, and one that it's on his. Could you please tell us what the truth is in that matter, please?
Sure. From the evidence that was presented by Mr. McCoy, it appears the fence is within, or the hedge, excuse me, is encroaching onto his property. He had presented some information in the packet here, based, I think, on a survey that was done a few years back. This is a drawing that he submitted. I can't attest to the accuracy of it, but what it shows here is the property line as he has drawn it, and then the fence panel here. So I know Mr. McCoy is contending that the hedge itself is encroaching over the property line.
Okay. Council? Just to remind council, what we're doing tonight is discussing, we're acting as a Board of Adjustment and Appeal, and that the administration, John Hinsman, declared that this is a fence, and that Mr. McCoy would have to then follow the fence regulations, have to take down the current structure. So that's what we're talking about tonight in relation to that, in the administration appeal. Councilmember Balsanic.
Thank you, Your Honor. Question for John. What is the definition of a fence?
Council member, it would be helpful if we had a specific definition within our code of a fence, which we do not. From my definition of a fence, and based upon our practice of defining what fences are, a fence is something that is built along a property line to demarcate the property line itself, or to enclose something. Those would be what I would understand as the general definitions of a fence. In a situation like this, it certainly is there for a demarcation purpose itself, and so we've classified it as a fence.
Well, I think, with all due respect, you're fairly limited in terms of your description of what a fence is. To me, a fence is a barrier. And historically, when somebody puts up a fence, it's a barrier that goes from the ground up. Keeps dogs in, keeps dogs out. Keeps rabbits in, keeps rabbits out. And I'm looking at this in terms of your decision that this is a fence. And I'm trying to rationalize how you came up with that decision. So now, my question is, what is the definition of a trellis?
Definition of a trellis, I'm less certain of, council member. I mean, my interpretation of that, generally with a trellis, it's something in which facilitates the growth of a plant material within it. It's essentially kind of a something that's used as a spine, or something that material can grow upon, like a vine or so forth.
Now, it's my understanding that the Dahls planted the vegetation, right?
Correct.
But they planted the vegetation on the McCoy property?
That I'm uncertain of. I'm not sure if it was planted that way originally, or if it became, when it got larger and spread fuller, if it encroached upon the McCoy property. The information I'm going off of has been submitted by Mr. McCoy. He's had a survey on the property that shows a portion of that hedge to encroach, but I have not independently verified that.
Well, when I inspected the property, and looking at the demarcation stake that goes north and south, the hedge, the vegetation, the majority of it is on the McCoy property. That's what I'm seeing then. Now, That being the case, the vegetation has grown, and it is now, what I also notice is that it is hanging over, for lack of a better word, is hanging over onto the Dahl property. Now, you know, and as Ms. Dahl stated, you know, we all live in the neighborhood there. I have a couple of, more than a couple, of beautiful old trees, over 100 and some years old. And I've got this one oak tree that is probably 20 feet onto my property off the side yard setback, but it hangs completely over my neighbor to the east. And it's my understanding, and then my neighbor to the east also has a walnut tree on her property, but it's very mature and it overhangs onto my property. And it's been my understanding when I've talked to city officials that even though it's my tree, whatever is hanging over onto the neighbor's property is the neighbor's property. And the neighbor can trim, cut, whatever to that vegetation, just as with the walnut tree that's hanging over my property, I can go ahead and trim, cut, do whatever I want to with that portion of the tree. I'm trying to get ourselves to a point here where we can say, you know, this is right and this is wrong in terms of the vegetation. We've got vegetation that is rooted in the McCoy property, but it does overhang, from what I can tell, it overhangs onto the McCoy property, or excuse me, the Dahl property. And that's where we are at this point. But I go back to me, the critical thing is this a fence or is this a trellis? And your definition as a staff member, again, with all due respect, doesn't fit my definition of a fence. I have never seen a fence that looked like this. If I were to see it any place in our neighborhood or any other neighborhood and saw it, I would say that's a trellis. Matter of fact, I have 3 trellises in my yard, and they're higher than 6 feet, but they are 18 inches to 2 feet off the ground. And I don't consider them to be a fence. I consider them to be a trellis, arbor. I have roses growing on 2 of them, and I have clematis growing on the others. But I don't consider them to be fences. I'll shut up here for a while, see if anybody else wants to get involved.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good segue, Mr. Balsonic, because I disagree. I think we go back to, I know how I would fix it, but I don't think that's the reason we're here tonight. We're here to make a decision. Is it a fence or is it, as we see, a trellis? I went and looked at it and inspected. I just heard an applicant talk that he considered it a panel. To me, that's a fence. And I looked at it. It has barriers that are mounted into the ground and goes up, and if it's 24 feet long, I think I see. I didn't see any vegetation growing up it to catch it, to do what a trellis does. Again, I don't think that's our goal to figure out what we're trying to say, is this a fence or not? I believe it's a fence. I think it is, and I think the applicant is kind of guided us. There's a reason they put it up as for a barrier. There's no definition. When I Googled it today that a fence has to be from the ground up. I think it is, in my opinion, a fence.
I will just say, and I agree with you, Councilmember Vaughn. When I took a look at this, I think in Mr. McCoy's letter and in his testimony tonight, he said that he wanted to build it there because primarily, like, he wanted to stop rabbits from coming in there. You know, he wants to stop the activity of people going in there and trimming the other side of this hedge, that he felt that that individual would be going on their property. That very definition is a barrier, and fences are barriers. And I think that the fact that this was built here was not to be a trellis. I think that's it's a definition to try to circumvent what it really is, in my opinion. In my opinion, and all the information I have before me is that it's a fence. It's meant to be a barrier, and it's outside our city code. It should only, and nothing would prevent, even after our action tonight, if we would uphold the administrative position, that doesn't prevent Mr. McCoy from building a fence. He just has to build it with you need a permit, and then B, you need to only go to 6 feet high. So we're not limiting Mr. McCoy's ability to build a fence, but he just can't build a fence this high. And that's how I see this issue. More discussion. Or I'll accept the motion, too. Councilmember Vaughn?
I make a motion to support the administrative decision that that is a fence, not a trellis.
Councilmember Vaughn makes a motion to support the administration staff recommendation. Is there a second to that? Second by Councilmember Brox. More discussion. Councilmember Balsanic.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, am I correct? I know you're not part of the building inspection department, but am I correct that vegetation that grows up and goes into a neighbor's property is their property and not mine?
Councilmember, I believe that's the case, yes.
All right. So if we have this hedge and it is rooted on one property but starts to go over onto another property, that becomes the ownership of that other property owner then?
Yeah, I believe that when a situation where a plant encroaches onto another property, that property owner has the ability to trim and maintain that plant. I believe that's the case, and I'm looking over at our city attorney to see if I'm astray at that one.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think there's general rules about that. I don't think you can be exactly clear-cut on that. Generally, you cannot take action that's going to damage the vegetation that's being grown. But yes, if there's roots or overhangs, generally, an adjacent property owner can trim the bush or whatever it is that we're talking about, but there are limitations, and I just want to make clear that this is not a perfect situation in the law.
Can you elaborate on what those limitations might be?
I think generally you can't commit damage to the growing item, the vegetation. General trimming, preventing it from being on your property, interfering with other structures on your property, interfering with other vegetation. The rules come up more in roots, where the roots grow into somebody's sidewalk. There's a clear ability to stop that, to prevent it, even if that may damage the tree or whatever is growing. Limbs are another situation. We get calls like this pretty frequently, and you have to be careful because if it's damaging, is it a clear line straight up and down? Perhaps not. I think it's just not a very clear demarcation in the law that absolutely allows it to happen every time. So I'm just trying to be cautious on giving a very clear opinion that way.
And I understand. I mean, my oak tree is what my neighbor Spencer Johnson has from the Civil War weekend, as a matter of fact. We talked about him earlier. He refers to it as a wisdom tree. And it is an oak tree, and we know that there are only certain times of the year when you should be trimming it. I think what I'm getting at here is that there should be dialogue between neighbors, so that if a neighbor wants to do something, they would talk to the other neighbor and try and reach some resolution so that there is an understanding of what exactly is going to happen. And I really do appreciate the fact that both Rita and Andy are here together to hear the comments and concerns on the part of the council. And as Rita said, it's a great neighborhood. We just live 2 doors, 3 doors down from both of you. It's the best neighborhood that Betsy and I have ever lived in. I wish we had moved here like 40 years ago. If we had, maybe I'd be mayor right now. And, no.
I'd still be in high school.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, a friend of ours over today, and she said, Paul Hicks, he's mayor, right? And I said, yeah. Oh, he graduated a year ahead of me in high school. And I just, they're all over the place, Mayor.
There you go.
Your Honor, yes. We know where the property lines are. We know who planted the vegetation. We know what one neighbor wants to do, and we know what the other neighbor would like to do. And I would just encourage, dialogue on that. I've heard what the mayor said and what Councilmember Vaughn has said. I still contend it's a trellis because of the way it is built. And a fence is ground up. That's the way I see a definition. Since we don't have a definition as part of the city code or city policy, then that's the way I feel it should be on that. And I respect what the mayor said. I respect what Councilmember Vaughn has said. But I still think it's a trellis. It is a trellis. It's not a barrier. So I'd like to encourage dialogue between the neighbors. See both of you, pretty much on a weekly basis. And if there's anything I can do, individually to help on that, be happy to. I've enjoyed, both of you as neighbors tremendously. Rita, along with your brother, Ken, and again, great neighborhood. So hopefully we can reach some resolution on this. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. We have a motion before the body. Councilmember Brox.
I don't want to belabor this much longer, but I did look up the definition of fence on Google. This is the Merriam-Webster definition, which is a barrier, railing, or other upright structure, typically of wood or wire enclosing an area of ground to mark a boundary, control access, or prevent escape. And I will have to politely and respectfully disagree with you, Councilmember Balsanic, in that the main purpose of this structure that Mr. McCoy has created is to create a barrier and to control access to the hedge. So when I read the definition of fence, even though we haven't defined it in the ordinance, I think it's reasonable that we could accept a commonly held definition of the word fence. And I believe that this structure that Mr. McCoy has created would fit into this definition. When I think about a trellis, I think about wire, like vines, or a plant that crawls, and it requires a structure to give it, to allow it to grow. But a hedge can grow independently. It doesn't need a structure to hold it up. So I think that whether or not this structure was there, it doesn't really have any bearing on whether or not the hedge would grow. So that's why I, according to all the information that we've been provided, and I understand this is a contentious issue, is probably painful for both neighbors, and I'm very sorry that you have to go through this. But I'm hoping that if we can resolve this part of it, then you guys can, like Councilmember Balsanic said, move on and have a discussion about how you could accomplish both of your goals while still maintaining the hedge and keeping it there. But I I would agree with Councilmember Vaughn and the mayor that according to this definition and as a commonly held definition, that this structure is a fence and that it should meet the city ordinance requirements of 6 feet.
Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Balsanic?
Thank you, Your Honor. So when we vote, the vote is to support the staff recommendation.
That is correct.
That is the motion before us.
That is correct,
And we have to have 6 out of 7?
No, we don't.
No, we
This
don't.
takes a majority vote. If there was a motion to say that we did not support the administration's findings, then we would need 6 out of 7
Then we
votes.
would need 6 out of 7.
That is
Okay.
correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay. There's no further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. 1 nay is recorded. The motion prevails. Thank you, and I'll echo Councilmember Balsanic's words, and I hope that as neighbors, you'll be able to find a resolution that's suitable for both sides. Okay, next. Okay, I'll get that. Next, we have the 2018 budget. We're going to have a discussion about the budget, and Melanie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. I am pleased to present to you tonight 2 resolutions setting the 2018 preliminary budget, property tax levy, and setting a public hearing date for the 2018 budget, and also setting the 2018 HEDRA HRA special tax levy. Briefly provide a little bit of background, which is included in your packet. The council earlier this year in May held a workshop where our finance staff provided some preliminary projections for the city council to consider as we went forward with preparing our budget. We talked about revenue and expenditure trends, market value, and tax capacity. At that time, the council provided us with some preliminary direction. We then worked with the finance committee chaired by Councilmember Vaughn, Balsanic, and Brox, and spent a full day with our department heads talking about their budget requests and talking about the needs that they've identified for 2018. We then met with the full council in a workshop on August 21st, where we brought forward some preliminary recommendations for the council to consider, including a 4.9% levy increase, as well as the capital investments we are recommending for next year. At that time, the council provided very good feedback on the capital items. We were able to walk through some of those items, and they provided some follow-up questions. Finally, at the end of that meeting, there was general direction that the council, while comfortable with a 4.9% preliminary tax levy, would prefer a final tax levy to be lower than 4%. So tonight's meeting, we are going to ask you to set a preliminary budget and tax levy 4.9%. Once that is set, that cannot go any higher, and staff will work with the finance committee and the full council to bring the final budget down within council parameters. So statutorily, we need to set that preliminary levy in September for both our city budget and the HEDRA. And then we have a finance committee set up for October 2nd, prior to that council meeting. And then we have a council workshop scheduled for October 30th, where we will do one final assessment with the council and make sure that we continue to be on the right track with your direction. So tonight before you, we ask that you approve the 2 resolutions, setting the budget tax levy and setting a public hearing date. We will have those 2 meetings in October, and then finally, the next steps for the council will be in December. We're on December 2nd. We will have a council meeting where we will have a public hearing, and then on the 18th, we will have the council adopt the final budget for 2018. So happy to stand for any questions, but ask that you support the resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you for introducing that item, Melanie. Council will take the resolution first. They approve the preliminary 2018 city property tax levy preliminary budget and set the truth and taxation hearing date, which is December 2nd. What's your wish, Council? Councilmember Balsanic makes that motion. seconded by Councilmember Brox. That motion is now before the body. Discussion to that motion. Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to confirm, is it December 2nd or December 4th?
I'm sorry.
4th is what I...
December 4th. Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember.
You bet. And I just want to echo what City Administrator Mescali talked about, is that it's at 4.9. It can't go any higher, but we can get this lower, and I think we will get this lower in the next few months here. So I look forward to working with staff on that and the rest of the council.
Okay. The motion before the body. Council, is there any further discussion to the motion? Councilmember Volt.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just had a question as to when it is that we would actually see what is in the capital improvement plan. I also attend the Finance Committee meeting as an observer, I guess. And there were quite a number of items that were covered by staff, kind of maybe on a wish list, you know, things that they want to see. And so I had made some assumptions that a few of the items that were discussed during that meeting were actually in, but then when we had our full council meeting, they were out. And so I was just wondering, when do we then see, you know, what are the time frames as to when it is that we're actually provided the specifics to examine? Thank you.
Your Honor and Council, thank you. We would expect that on October 2nd, when we meet the Finance Committee. We will have some proposals for the committee to consider. And at that point, and again, those follow-up questions from that August 21st full council workshop. And then the intent, again, is to have a full council workshop on October 30th, at which point we will walk through the revenue and expenditure projections as well as the capital improvement recommendations at that time. So between October 2nd and the 30th, we'll provide more information to the full council.
Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. At that point, we'll be seeing some sub-4 recommendations. Is that correct? Is that my understanding? Sub 4%?
Yes, that would be the staff's intent, is to comply with council direction on that. Absolutely.
I think it's critical that we gave direction the last time to go under 4% for that general levy. So, so I'm quite pleased that this council gave that direction at the workshop to go under 4%. Is there any further discussion to the motion before the body? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Next is the resolution to approve the proposed 2018 HEDRA HRA special tax levy. Council? Councilmember Balsanic, a member of the HEDRA, makes a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Vaughn. That motion is before the body. Any discussion to that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. Okay. Next, we have the Public Arts Task Force recommendation. And Melanie, I'll turn that over.
Maybe I'll tee it up real quick. Your Honor and council members, we're pleased to have B. Westerberg and Mary Ellen Fox from our Advisory Public Arts Task Force with us tonight. The task force went out for a call for proposals earlier this year, and they do have a recommendation for the council that they would like to walk through and share with the council some of the work they've been doing. This is an advisory task force that's been in place for, I think, early part of 2015. So I'll turn it over to B and Mary Ellen. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. All that great opening acts, and here we are. Yes, and Mary Ellen and I were both on the original appointment of that committee, and we'll see where our little arrows go here. As you can see, the Public Arts Task Force was recommended a time ago when you, as the council, decided this was going to be a wise thing to do for our area, which has been so growing dramatically in that direction. And the definition of public art was a main concern of you, and you wanted to do something about it. And the art in the public realm, free and accessible to all members of a community. And the public art includes, but is not limited to, and this is very important to say, not limited to, temporary or permanent sculptures and murals, theatrical or musical performances, festivals, and dances. was the definition that was given on that. And we'll do our little arrow thing here. Okay, 2015, a dramatic date in history here because you as a council decided there was something to be done. The original was a pilot program designed to focus on supporting and promoting arts in Hastings. And we were charged with forwarding recommendations to City Council regarding public art. And that all happened with an announcement in the paper asking for people to volunteer to be on this council. We had this committee. We had no idea what was going to be happening, but it was sounded like it was interesting, and it called for people with a wide background to apply for this. And we indeed did get a very wonderful, wide variety of people that were interested in it, and Melanie Mescoli was our first leader of that. And we were busy trying to decide just what we were going to do and who we were. And we went to look at all this work being done downtown. It was mostly big humps of dirt, lots of things that were being moved around, and we're thinking, okay, where are they talking about where they want art? So this was part of our task. And we published our first call for the art project. We were charged to find something for art, mainly in that large area in front of the pavilion. Now, remember, the pavilion was not yet completed when we did that, and we weren't real sure exactly what we wanted to do. We decided we would put a call out, which meant we put a call out for the art, send out the notification that we were looking for artists to come to do a project for us that we were going to have in front of the whole public. And we did get a number of people that were interested in it, and we asked the call, and our first commissioned art piece, the call focused on three potential art areas in the park, and we received the 7 submissions in response to this. And out of that, we did also have put out for public opinion. It was on the internet through the city council, city site. Then people could also put their idea of what we did. We did choose an artist, Will C. Toyds. He is from the St. Cloud area, and his item was called Nasset. And this was the item that was chosen. And we worked with him a lot. We grilled him and all kinds of good things about, and had him do some revisions on it in his vision of art. We checked his background. We checked his work. He has done extensive work in the Bahamas. He also did a lot of things there for an underground park. He did all these sculptures that are underwater, and this was one of the things that we thought was quite interesting, and he had this there. We worked extensively with him. He needed some help in getting this together, and we were also very fortunate to have the city crews help, because he needed a lot of work with moving things around, and also a place to have the structure put together, and the city also helped him a lot there. 2017, new members, the grant appraisal and call for entries. We added 3 new members, and we had a new staff liaison, and Melanie went on to do her other duties there. But she changed hands over to a very, very wonderful Sarah Hodder, who has been working very well with us. And we submitted a preliminary application for Arts Place America grant to transfer that old bridge piece into works of art. I don't know if you all are all aware, there is a piece of the bridge that was saved, and it's been sitting there gaining natural rust and dust. And we want to find just the perfect artist to do something dramatic with it. And we came up with a proposal on the very last minute to get in on this, and thanks to Mary Allen, who did actually a 5-minute video, and we weren't sure we could find anybody to do that, and she did a wonderful video. And our idea was that we would have the bridge pieces divided into areas and put throughout the town on biking areas and so forth. People think that we're just working with the downtown core, but we do have the whole city in mind for eventually doing kinds of things with it. So we want to expand out and do that. So this was this. And they had over 1,000 entries for this. And of course, they could only choose one. We were not chosen, but they did send a letter of recommendations of what we could do in the future and to enhance our ideas of what we can do, and invited us to try again next year with that item. And these are very learning structures for us to issue these calls. And we thought, oh, how are we going to do this? This is very interesting. But we are learning. I think we're probably at the toddler stage now, not the baby stage. So we are working our way up. And it's just a wonderful time. Now we're in another exciting area. We published a call for entries for a warming house exterior designs. And we received 4 proposals for this. This is the building, a structure. Actually, other people would call it probably just something that's on the train, but they're used a lot. This is a metal shipping container. And we thought, okay, this is going to be a great area for people to display their art. And it's going to be used as the warming house down at the park area. This is the area where it's going to be for in the winter time, where it's going to be that. So we're there. Okay. And the city had input on that. We said, we were talking about, we're going to drill some neat holes in there. We're going to put some awful things. And the city, you guys said, okay, be reasonable. No addition penetrations of the walls or the roof so that it stays waterproof and watertight and so forth. So in our call, we made sure that we had these designations there. And we did not do a design specification. We said, use your imagination. See what we're going to do. And this is the artist work. Let's go ahead here. We're going to come back to this here. Going to show you what the artist concept is going to be for that container. And it's a lot of fine print there, but I'll just give you a little overrun. It was the one that really struck all of us. We look at this as being very multifunctional, not only for the warming house area, but also for other events through the city. As you do know that Hastings is the first bird city in Minnesota, and we really want to grasp onto that, get anything free that we can to get publicized. And as the artist herself said, part of this is that it kind of shocks you when you first see it. You just don't go, oh yeah, I guess I didn't see it. It's just really going to pop your eyes and get you notice the thing. And she's working with native birds and things of that nature. Right there is the side where the door and the windows are. And she has done research on the birds that are native to here, and she's working with that. They are 2 artists from Florida, and they were our people that were doing it. So they're kind of side, there's a before and an after there. So you can see with the birds and without the birds, that would be on that. And of course, as you do, this is going to be there only in the winter time at the site for the warming house. And the city facilitates moving it in and out and having it at storage on the other times there. So we're gonna, let's see here. I kind of lost where we were there, but I'll tell you about it as what we did on that was put the call out. We made the decision, and Sarah really, really worked with the artist, finding out for sure what they needed to make sure that they realized, hey, this is Minnesota. This is not Florida. And we are very fortunate to have a very knowledgeable gentleman of construction and so forth on the task force. And he was grilling about, okay, how we're going to seal this, how we're going to put this on, are we going to do other kinds of things? So it was very well thought out as to what they were going to do. And now what we're doing is we want to work with having it done as fast as possible. And Sarah is looking into having it done on it inside in some of the city property so that we can be sure we don't have a weather issue or a temperature issue to do that. And our goal is we would love to have this done so that we can have this up and running this winter for our people to enjoy, and then to have it there, and then to use it for other events. And we really are working on, maybe we can work this into our Bird City and other kinds of things. Our group, we do not look at just spending money. We were so thankful that when we joined that, hey, you guys have a fun. We thought we were going to have a bake sale and sell corn on the streets or something, but you had $10,000 in there. About, woo! We sure found out after a while, it really, by the time you get everything. So we have been very diligent about spending money. We're one of the greatest scrounger groups, and we found out that we know so many people that know so many people that we're really trying to use that and just be very frugal with using the money and make sure that we do wise things, because we do realize it's going to be out there in the public and we will be judged to say, like they're going to say, oh my God, how come they decided to do that with our tax dollars? So our group is very, very aware that the money is public money, and we want to do the very, very best plus on using that amount of money. And we do have a wonderful group, and we will continue to strive to make it one of the highlights of this town as it is emerging into a wonderful art area. So we would ask that you give us the amount of money that was intended for this event, and so that we could carry on and confirm with the artists that they can go ahead and we can see this wonderful place this winter. So, do you have any questions that I could answer?
Mrs. Westerberg, I wish we had a little more enthusiasm from you on this presentation. No, that's outstanding.
Oh, wait till you see me do I'm taking drumming, using the wonderful facilities. That park is so great because I, for the first time a couple of weeks ago, went and played on the musical bars when we were out there doing drumming from Breakaway Arts and drumming, and I was doing my squirrel and my spider dances. This is not me. My parents, if they were alive, they were definitely turning in their grave now that I was doing those things. But I went to play on the music things. I thought, how great that all this is in place from when we very first looked at it as committee, because it was all just bulldozers and humps and lumps, and we couldn't picture anything being there. So it was really great. So and we're so excited with Art Space, and one of our members of the committee is actually going to be a resident. So we feel we really have a nice in-key that he's going to be there, so we can facilitate and really work with those people down at Art Space. Get them into the town, get them into the city.
Well, I can tell you that we're very proud. I'm very proud of the work of this committee. I think what you're doing is important work. We all know in the city of Hastings, we can see it before our eyes, the importance of art and the livability of a community and the emergence of the arts community in Hastings. And it's getting noticed not just in Hastings, but it's outside of Hastings too.
We had applications for this, not a large amount, but we had one from Nevada, and these artists are from Florida. And we did have some local artists too, but on some of our other grants, we had people from out of state. I don't know, we were wondering, how on earth did they ever find out that we had this hall? It was just amazing. Like 15 years ago, if you asked, is there an artist in the Hastings area? You would probably say, oh, gee, does the art teacher at the high school count? That's the only one we know. And then with HPAC coming in, that was just a dramatic thing, and it's just been growing and growing ever since. And now with the bank and the church being turned into these wonderful areas and HPAC, so we're really excited about it. And
That's awesome.
fun stuff and so forth. So.
Well, thank you for your report. It was well done. We appreciate it. Council, we have this before us. Councilmember Vaughn?
I just got a quick question for B. Thank you
Councilman?
for your enthusiasm. I had heard you talk at the beginning about one of the goals is to make sure it's not temporary. I appreciate you picking this storage thing because I'm not a big fan of what it looks like today as a storage building down there. So I love the design. I'm just going to encourage us to find a way to put this in public view year-round. I don't want to see it go away at storage in the summer when we're not using it. It's great there in winter. I would encourage us, because I think I heard that the art can't be temporary. So to me, this is temporary if we go put it away and bring it back. So that's my one encouragement to
Okay, well,
use
let's
it
just
somewhere.
address this. I would be very, very pleased to have this to go around. But we do talk about temporary art too. We are talking about having temporary things in the plan that would come for a year perhaps, or even a 6-month installation, and then it would change. So we want to have it also fresh and mobile too. So some of it would be. What we want for the ones that we're gonna pay the big bucks for, we want those to be nice and permanent, be able to stand up to the temperature, to the weather, have kids crawling on it, maybe stand a little graffiti with a little touch up. But some of it certainly could be in the art, could be temporary.
Okay.
We're working that into it. But this would be, it would be a shame to tuck him away when we could do that. Maybe for Rivertown Days, it could be used for something. Maybe it doesn't even really.
Dee, can you speak to the microphone so people at home can hear you? Just to make sure we all hear.
Okay. It would be a great thing to have available to do that, so to tuck it away in that sense. And it would be really do that. And I would suppose maybe if it's out this summer and we use it, maybe we could get some AC in there. I'm sure we don't have AC for the winter project in it, but we can deal with that when the time comes for it. So, but just want to be clear that our art, it does include sculptures and, we could do mimes and other kinds of things. Some of it could be very temporary, partially temporary, but the really meat of the things that we're going to pay our money for, we want to get our money's worth and have those up for public use. Does that answer?
Thanks for your clarification. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Motion. Councilmember Brox makes a motion to accept the Art Task Force recommendation. Okay, seconded by Councilmember Fulch. Okay, is there further comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails. And thank you, and please extend to all of your commission members how much we appreciate
But
all
thank
that
you
they're
very
doing.
much, and we'll get have Sarah hop right on this to get those artists to know that they can start doing their work then.
All right, thank you
very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, council, next on the agenda, Councilmember Fulch wanted to bring something forward to our attention on the Vermillion Street, Highway 61, some road weeds there, some plant road weeds. So I'll turn that over to Councilmember Fulch, who has the floor.
Back and forth here.
Thank you, Your Honor. And
Thank you.
thank you, Council, for bearing with me for a few extra moments. I know our meeting is getting long, and so I apologize. But for quite some time, last couple of years at least, I have noticed that there is a considerable amount of blight that's developing on Highway 61. And last fall, when those of us who work for election were out door knocking, I heard from quite a few folks in my ward that they were concerned with the conditions on, which I always refer to as the gateways into our community, both being when you first come off the bridge onto Highway 61, and then the approach from the southern, south of Hastings coming up Highway 61 or 316. And so I took it upon myself to go take some pictures, and this is 3 weeks ago or so, and we've had plenty of rain since then, and the conditions have remained much the same. And so what I noticed is that along the median, it appears that what's happened is, the snow plows go through, right? And they chisel away at the concrete, and that allows for, gaps to occur and for sediment to deposit there and, weeds to grow, and that's natural. I realize that Highway 61 is a MnDOT road, and it is not the responsibility of the city, and so I'm not placing blame here. We all understand the state has many of its own financial needs, and MnDOT has been stretched very thin, and so I'm not trying to lay blame by any means here, but I am very concerned. I think that this has gotten too far. It's hard to see up there on the screen, but what I have here is essentially like in front of Duff's Meats and the Perkins area, beginning with the median conditions there, where there's foot-long weeds growing, and many of these weeds are now 2 feet in height. And I noticed a whole new crop of cotton trees growing as well. Here is, in particular, the area around on Highway 61, the Vermillion Bridge. This is the intersection of County Road 47, and it's almost a field, that particular intersection. And then this is looking at the Vermilion Bridge. I wish we could dim the lights so that you could see this a little bit better. These weeds are over 2 feet high at this point, and the deterioration of the median is just something awful. And so the median looks terrible, and along the sides of the curbs, there's also a considerable amount of weeds. I actually stopped at the O'Reilly auto parts store and spoke with the young man who's the manager there, and I asked him if he was aware of his responsibility to take care of the sidewalk, and he said that he hadn't been aware of that, and I asked him if he could have one of his staff remove the weeds because they were all over the sidewalk, and so they did remove the weeds that were directly on the sidewalk, but they left all the weeds that were along the curb. And there are many properties, not just to single out O'Reilly's, but there are many properties along this area that have significant weeds growing along the sidewalk. Again, this is another picture of the Vermilion Bridge. There are considerable weeds not growing, in the indentations of the median, which is broken apart. This is just along the side of the bridge itself, where what appears to have been some kind of caulking or sealant has just deteriorated, and the weeds are just full-fledged coming through. So the section which is most traumatically in need of help is starting on the southernmost approach of the Las Margaritas property. It's not their property is beautifully kept. It's starting with the median and then the roadway section going north of the Vermilion Bridge. This is just the northwestern corner, so it's across from the mill. That property there, they at least looked like they had put down some weed killer, but decided just to leave the dead weeds there. And so I know that, some folks may think, oh my goodness, do we really need to care about weeds? Well, I think that it's significant in that, our community has quite a number of people who travel through it. On the weekends, they're going to southern Minnesota. Motorcycle runs go through. Lots of people, particularly in the fall, like to go down, apple orchards come through, go down to Lake Pepin. And I just think that our community really does a disservice to itself by having the condition, all these weeds, 2 feet high weeds, in the middle of our main street, going through our city. And so I was looking for, and I hate to burden our city staff because, like I said, I realized that this is not the fault of the city by any means, the Public Works Department. I realize that the highway itself, like I said, belongs to MnDOT, and these sidewalks, this is in front of the dairy store where there are also 2 foot high weeds all along the sidewalk there. That is, I'm about 98% sure that it's the property owner's responsibility to take care of the sidewalks, but clearly there hasn't been enough of a strong enough position by the city to enforce the weed rules, to cite violations. And so I looked to the council for discussion about what it is that we could do to address the situation so that our community gives its best, we put our best foot forward. We can be proud of our community. You know how the old adage goes, it's the first 60 seconds, right? That when you meet someone that gives you the impression and it sets forth your attitude towards that person. And then I think a lot can be said to our main street when people are coming through our community and they see that we don't take care of our, Highway 61 in the condition that it's in. And so again, it starts across from Las Margaritas. The worst sections go up to about Perkins, and then there's another bad section in front of Green Mill there. And then going down closer to the bridge, there are some properties there as well that have a lot of weeds along the sidewalk. And so I open it to discussion.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Let's open up the discussion. Councilmember Liefeld.
You know, I've noticed since I've been on the council, I'm noticing things in other cities that I would have never noticed before. Things I'm watching for as I'm traveling and going through towns. And Tina, you're right, it does look awful. And it looks awful anywhere I go and I notice it. It's like, wow, that just doesn't put a good presence forward. I'm seeing two separate issues here, though, so I'm not exactly sure how we'd go forward in talking about this. One, obviously, intersections and medians, which appear to be the state. We have an issue there. But secondly, something that we can probably address here would be the sidewalks at residences, the sidewalks at businesses. Who's actually responsible for that upkeep, and how are we policing, patrolling, whatever the word is, that particular ordinance? But in looking at your pictures and in my little bike ride through town yesterday, I was noticing that the areas that have grass boulevards look so much nicer than the areas that have tarred or cement boulevards. Grass comes up through grass, it's still grass. You know, it comes up through the tar and you've got weeds. So when you're looking in front of the Leduc, that's gorgeous. You know, they've got grass, so when someone comes to mow, they have to mow it also. But we've got all these medians or whatever, boulevards, I guess, that are tar and cement. Those are the eyesore. So definitely something for us with our Highway 61, the corridor project, to keep in mind. Might be a little bit more upkeep for a homeowner or a business, but it definitely is aesthetically pleasing. So I agree. I don't know which direction to go with something like this, but I feel as though there are some things within our, with the city ordinances that we should be probably talking about. But this, you're definitely not the only one who's noticing this, and thanks for bringing it forward.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Councilmember Balsanic.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I appreciate Councilmember Fulch bringing this before the city council. But to echo what Councilmember Liefeld just said, there are so many different avenues to explore in terms of how we're going to get a handle on this. And I don't know whether this is really an appropriate place right now to start talking about it. So what I would like to do is make a motion to send this item to an appropriate city council committee so that staff and the committee can do their homework on this and then come back to the city to the city council with a recommendation. So I'm making that motion to send it to an appropriate committee.
Okay. Let's see, should we get a committee? Operations, maybe? Probably Operations Committee, will you chair, Mr. Chairman?
Operations, it could be Public Works, I don't know.
Yeah, that'd be under Operations, so, and you chair that committee.
Well, okay, Operations, yes. Okay, so let's make the motion to send it to the Operations Committee, and then we can get coordination with the staff and come back with a recommendation to the full
Councilmember
council.
Balsanic makes a motion to send this to Operations Committee for further evaluation. Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilmember Brox. That motion is now before the body. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Councilmember Balsanic, for sending that. Thank you, Councilmember Fultz, for bringing it to awareness. I think we've all seen it. We've always seen how we're going to fix it, because I think, I like how we picked on one street, but I think it's a community thing. I hear the word burden on staff. It's actually going to be a priority. It's going to cost money, and I think MnDOT has thousands of miles to maintain. This is our town. Our city's going to have to maintain that corridor, no matter what corridor it is, but we can't enforce any I don't think we can enforce weeds or any issue if we can't take care of what we own. And if we take care of what we own, then we can go set our code enforcement and do what it has to do. But I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a burden, and I think it'll bring up in the budget meeting, because this will cost money if this is a priority that council's going to put to staff to try to figure out how to take care of.
One of the things I'd like to see, if it goes to Operations Committees, take a look at the ordinances. We have the snow clear ordinances for the sidewalk, right? Do we want to extend that to weeds and to aesthetics of that nature? Maybe that might have a full discussion about that. And so I think that would have to be fully vetted too. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. With all due respect, I think that the committee structure gets a little frustrating, at least it does for me, because it takes about 2 months at this point, at a minimum, to get committee put on the calendar and for folks to follow up. I have done my research a little bit on the median, and what I know so far is that it is a MnDOT property, and MnDOT, all they'll do is spray a weed killer on it. And that this is what they did last year. They sprayed weed killer on it to stop new growth from occurring, but all the old growth, all that dead stuff, stays exactly there. And last year, it disappeared about mid-December when the snowplows went through and we had enough snow accumulation to swipe it off. And so at this point, our community has been having between 1 to 2 foot long weeds in its medium for 6 months of the year. And so what I do know also, asking colleagues of mine at Red Wing in regards to how do you do street maintenance, they've said that you can't run a street sweeper across this, it won't remove it. If it's new growth, and you do it every week, that will keep the new growth from appearing, but when you have established weeds, it's just not strong enough, it's not sturdy enough, the street sweepers, to remove it. And really the only option is to just hand pull these weeds to get rid of them. I mean, that's the only thing we can do. And so what I'm asking for is I'm going to ask for a motion that we ask city staff to assign it to the streets crew for them to go through, for a day and go through and pull these weeds. It's really not that far of a section. I mean, I've actually kidded about doing it myself, but otherwise, we're looking at, it'll be sometime, 2 months from now, we're already at the beginning of September, October, November, we're talking November, and then we're going to ask staff to go out there when it's freezing to pull, weeds out of the median. And so we're stuck again with having these weeds all winter long, and it wouldn't be until next year that something would be done.
I will entertain your motion after, we already have a motion before the body, so it's out of order at this point.
Okay.
Unless the motion fails, and then we're back to square one where another motion could be accepted.
Sure.
So right now, we have a motion before the body first.
Okay.
So one motion at a time. Councilmember Liefeld.
Thanks, Your Honor. To piggyback a bit off of Councilmember Vaughn and Councilmember Fulch there, is, Mark, you mentioned that we need to, as a community, have some say in this, some control in this, some responsibility. Is this something, it's been a long time I've done city cleanup on community roads. Is this a possibility that this is something, Tina, I'd be more than willing to spearhead with you to do a cleanup program of, as Councilmember Vaughn indicated, concerned community members. I don't know how it works since it's a state road. I don't understand how that process would work, but maybe that might be better suited where I'd be willing to donate my time on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon to pull weeds, reason to go buy a new pair of gloves, and give that a try. So maybe that's an option.
Sure. The only thing I worry about is just doing it safely. We would need to have reflective vests and maybe cones or something to that effect. And so we would want to make sure that we are in compliance with OSHA or MnDOT standards for safety if you're going to be working in the median, that kind of thing, right?
Did you ask Councilmember Vaughn a question? I just want to make clear.
No, I was agreeing with and adding maybe a possibility. I'm not sure that sending this, as you're stating, it's a process. So I think sending it to committee for future reference is definitely the way to go. But to address the issue that you're discussing right now today, you're right. If we send it to committee, these weeds aren't getting fixed before next spring because winter comes. So then we don't have that problem for a few months. So let's figure out how to handle it and how to address it right away next spring. But in the interim, I'm just maybe offering something that we could do as again, just volunteering my own time as a council member and concerned citizen, as Mr. Vaughn put there, so thoughts.
And make sure you get clearance from MnDOT first, because you're on their roadway. Councilmember Lund.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think it's just a, Councilmember Liefeld just spoke to that, but it's a bigger issue. It's a very valid point. You look at it all together like that, and it starts to get a little bit disappointing. But it's a bigger issue that needs to be discussed that, as Councilmember Vaughn mentioned, can have budget implications. It's not a one-time thing. Ask my wife and look at our garden. There used to be tomatoes in there somewhere. So I think it's probably just the right thing to do is accept that this is a long-term thing, and in 2018, those are going to be darn nice streets. But this time around, it's probably just too far into the season to do the right thing, which is to come up with a reoccurring plan and structure and fund it appropriately if we decide that's the way to go. So I hear what you're saying. I agree with your overall effort, but the immediate action I don't know if makes sense, and I don't know if we have that budgeted in the time of the staff anyway to be able to take time out to do that as we prepare things for the winter and so forth. So I'll support moving this to committee, but not anything else.
Councilmember Brox.
Turn on my mic. How would we normally deal with this when we notice it? What would be your team's plan of action, and what would be the normal process for handling an issue like this?
Your Honor and council members, it's a good question. With respect to what's in the kind of, I'm going to call the outside of the road, the right of way, the sidewalk, excuse me. We address that with the property owner. So just like regular code enforcement, we encourage you all to, if you see something that you have a concern with, call us and we'll dispatch code enforcement to it. With regards to the median, we are meeting with MnDOT. We were supposed to meet with them last week and schedules got a little sideways, but we're meeting with them on the Vermillion Street corridor, and we have probably easily a half a dozen things, this being one of them, to visit with them about what would they be willing to let us do, what would their solution be, help us get to a resolution on this.
So would you consider that discussion with MnDOT to be a short-term solution discussion or a long-term solution discussion?
Perhaps both. Perhaps both. What can we do in the short term to address what I'm hearing are council's concerns, and then what's our long-term strategy for getting at this issue? And so perhaps it could be check both of those boxes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Balsanic.
And it's my hope that by sending it to the Operations Committee, we can come up with a long-term solution. I've been on the council 9 years now. Thank God for the council committee system. When I first ran for council 1,000 years ago, I met with Attorney Hazlitt, who decided not to run in Ward 2. And he told me, he said, Joe, he said, the council committee system is the best thing that the council has going for it. Because you get the staff going and doing the homework. You get experts if you need. You get expert information that goes through the committee. And by the time the recommendation comes from that committee to the council, you're pretty much just dotting the i's and crossing the t's. And it's a solid recommendation that will come. So, for what it's worth, I think the committee system is a good system. This is politics. It takes time. to go through and figure out whose sidewalk is whose sidewalk and whose right-of-way is whose right-of-way. And in terms of an overall plan for the long term, I think the committee will serve the council very well. And again, I'm just speaking very highly of the committee system. It makes our lives a little bit easier by the time it comes to a city council meeting. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, we have a motion before the body. Is there any further discussion to the motion? Councilmember Fulch.
Your Honor, I don't disagree with finding a long-term solution for this, because clearly it's not going to rectify itself on its own. However, I do disagree with the committee system. I have been I have not been glamored at all by the committee system, and oftentimes I think about half the things that get sent to committee could have easily have been discussed within the council meetings. We could have had full presentations provided by staff to us. We could have had a discussion and moved things forward. There's a backlog of issues that need to go before the committee, and it is a long delay. Takes months to get a meeting on the books, and then and then when you do go to a committee, if you're not on that committee meeting and you're interested in that issue and you decide to go to it, you're not recognized. You're not treated as if you're a member of the council. And so I think that there is room for improvement, for better utilizing our time here in the chamber for group discussion, so that there isn't such of a backlog. I think that puts a tremendous toll on Melanie's time. And I think that we would be more transparent as a governmental body if we had better discussions here on camera rather than behind closed doors, when those conversations could be happening here. So,
Well, Council, let me suggest to you that I think we're getting off the subject of weeds, and that is a different discussion. That you're suggesting that we're moving ourselves into an area of discussion. I always think that when we all hold back and we have an opportunity to evaluate and have analysis on issues that are important to the people of our city, that whenever you have a process that can examine more than less, is good. And however we get to that point, we may disagree on how that's done. But until that point, things change. If this council ever wants to change the system, we could take a look at that later. Right now, we have before us weeds, and we're going to stay on that subject now.
we're in the weeds.
We're in the weeds, that's right. So let's see if we can find ourselves out of the weeds and vote on this particular motion before the body. Is there any further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. Okay. What we have before the next item of business is comments from the audience. Are there any comments from the audience? And I praise the Fourth Estate for being here, reporting on this, and staying to the bitter end. Good job on you. So is there any comments from the audience this evening? Okay. Seeing none, council announcements. Councilmember Vaughn.
Just that I'll be representing the city down at the Minnesota High Speed Rail on Thursday at 9:30 in Red Wing, and our discussion continues to try to get a second Amtrak to Chicago and back in one day. Currently, we have one. We're looking to try to get a second.
I've been following that a little bit. Congratulations on your work on that. There's some momentum there.
Momentum, but it is a long process.
It is a very long process. Okay, further announcements? Yeah. Okay, council, I have a few announcements. First of all, let's remember that on September 17th will be Councilmember Brock's birthday. Happy birthday on the 17th of this month. What do we have planned? Big party? Which time you got for you? Celebrate Constitution Day on your birthday. Oh, that's right, same day. Okay, happy birthday, Councilmember. On Wednesday, September 6th, the City Council will have a group portrait done at 5:30. That will be at Levy Park, and so that will be tomorrow. Tomorrow at 5:30, group photo. So remember that when we were in school. So, okay, bring your comb, whatever you need to do. Bring your favorite tie or favorite outfit. Okay, so tomorrow will be Portrait Day. On this Thursday, September 7th, the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee will be meeting at City Hall from 7 to 8 p.m. On Sunday, this Sunday is the Fire Department Booyah, which will be at the KC Hall beginning at 11 a.m. And considering our actions tonight, I don't know how much longer it'll be at that site, but for this year, it'll be at the KC Hall at 11 a.m. this Sunday, the Fire Department Booyah. On Monday, September 11th, from 6 to 7 p.m., the Vermillion Recorder Advisory Committee will be meeting at City Hall. And from 7 to 8:30, we will host a community workshop open to the public to share their feedback on this important corridor. And then at 7 p.m., the Planning Commission will be meeting at City Hall that evening as well. On Tuesday, September 12th, at 6 p.m., the Parks and Recreation Commission will be meeting at City Hall. And City Council, we have no further, I will make one more reminder that this weekend is Civil War weekend at the Leduc Mansion. We have no further business before this council. A motion to adjourn is in order. Councilmember Vaughn makes that motion. Councilmember Brock second that motion. That's a non-debatable motion. All those in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion prevails, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.